Welcome, my friends, to Art Resurrection, Episode 1. In this episode to start the series, I'm going to be resurrecting this toothless bust I started nearly 2 years ago. Okay, first things first, I need to go through and get rid of all the unwanted and or damaged pieces of the sculpture. I sanded off all the chip scales, switching between rough and light sandpaper, to make sure I wouldn't damage the good parts of the ear when I get close to them. I did my best to carefully remove the saddle and the metal pieces. Then once the main piece of the saddle was removed, I very carefully and slowly carved the saddle off the sculpture.
Instant replay.
And after removing all the unwanted parts of the sculpture, I roughed up and added deep scratches to the areas so the new clay would have something to grab onto. When doing the scales, I tried doing them how I originally sculpted them. Now, if the whole sculpture wasn't baked, this would have worked. But due to me trying to lay down a piece of thin clay, then sculpting the scales onto the clay, it would move around and shift, ruining the scales I sculpted before. This is because even though the area was roughed up with sandpaper, I'm trying to make scales thin, but when doing so they lift up or move too easily. So I had to sculpt one scale at a time. And there were so many scales. So many scales. So many scales. But that's okay, because I had to add color to them anyway. So that way they would stand out and the camera would focus on them better.
Itchy nose.
When I was working on the saddle, I carved out a small section on the back and refilled it in with some clay, so that way the saddle would have kind of a wedge into the old sculpture. Right here I'm adding in a wire buckle piece, cutting out a small piece of the straps on the saddle, then I lift up both strap pieces and slide the ring under it and then force them back around the ring, making it look like the leather straps are wrapped around the ring shape. For the bottom of the base, I actually used air dry clay, because originally I thought when I was making the resin crystals, I wouldn't be able to bake it anymore. I'll have more on that in a little bit. But I used air dry clay to make the bottom of the base, and then it turned out later on I was able to pop off the bottom of the base when it dried, so I was able to use the oil-based clay again later anyway. You liking the video so far? Consider liking and subscribing. And check out some of my other videos, such as Orion Plays FNAF, or my drawing videos. Or even check out some of my videos where I try drawing with blacklight. And if you find a pattern of yourself liking my other content, why not consider subscribing to help out the channel? Back to the video. Alright, now for the fun part, painting the sculpture. So for the wood part of the base, I went in with some stain. The stain ended up being too dark. I wanted to have the kind of braided look, have the wood burn look that I put into it. But the wood stain ended up being too dark even after I rubbed it off and watered it down. So what I did is I just went in later with some white paint and made it look old and rustic. Right here I'm just going in with the base coat of kind of a mid-gray acrylic paint. Just going through all the rocks and boulders that I added in, just with the first coat. I tried to get all of them as even as possible. There were some parts that I missed and I had to go back and paint later, but for the most part I got everything. Now what I'm doing is I'm preparing Toothless to be painted. I wanted to give him a nice even coverage of black paint, so I wanted to try using my airbrush for this. I went in and I taped up all the stuff I didn't want any black paint getting on. I went in with a kneaded eraser and covered up Toothless's eyes so that way they wouldn't be painted black. So that way they'd be a lot easier to paint green later. Then I went in with my airbrush and lightly painted the first layer on with just a regular airbrush black. Or really, the only black I had lying around. Once I got the first layer on, I went in and got some of the parts that I wasn't able to reach with the airbrush with just a fine tip paintbrush. And then I would go in again with the airbrush just to give it one nice even coating, that way everything looked even. Then I'm taking one of my rougher brushes and I'm just dry brushing on some blue paint onto parts of the muscle that stick out more. Kind of like the eyebrow muscles above his eyes. Basically any of the muscles that would have extra light shining on top of them is where I added this extra blue. So like his little spiked fins on the top of his head would get some blue. The muscle on top of his eyebrow would get some blue. The muscles that are leading to the wings on the sides of the bust would get blue, etc. Wanted to put a little bit of weathering onto the sculpture, so I went in with just some black and brown acrylic paint and just a very small amount of green on specific spots, because later on I'd be going through and putting fake algae down as well. For Toothless's eyes, I went in with my lightest green first, trying to get it as close to the green that resembled his eyes. I would very lightly put thin strokes of various shades of dark and mid and bright green around where his iris is going to go. And then once those lines are finished, I went in and painted his iris.
And now, the reveal.
Alright, here is the finished sculpture in all of its glory. I do want to critique it a little bit with you, just so that way you know what I was trying to do and what ended up happening. First thing I'm going to point out is if it wasn't shiny before on camera, definitely is now. And the reason for that is I accidentally sprayed Toothless with the wrong clear coat. I wanted to spray him with a matte finish, but instead I sprayed him with a high gloss finish by accident, because his eyes originally were supposed to be the only thing that was glossy. So that way his eyes looked like they were realistic, because you know your eyes are going to be moist. In the end, there's a reason why I kept that high gloss finish on him, and I'll show you. The crystals turned out really good. I really like how the crystals turned out. This wood base turned out good. The algae looks really nice. I am super glad that I got rid of the old saddle and replaced it with this new one. I wanted a mix between the saddle from all of the movies, but I ended up just going more or less with the second and the third movie. So the saddle is more or less shape-wise based off the second movie. I added a red stripe here, red stripe on the other side, and then 2 black stripes, and then I made this part right here red. And the rest of it is just kind of like that weathered brown. You can kind of see some of the like distressed parts in the saddle, like there's some marks right there you can kind of see. And I went through the whole sculpture and just lightly dusted in with like a metallic purple and a glossy blue. And I'm really glad that I did that, because when it mixed with the high gloss finish in the sunlight, he actually kind of looks like he's glowing a little bit. So I wanted him to look like a mix between the hidden world as well. So I wanted his colors to pop a little more, like maybe some really dark blues and purples. I also tried making these crystals glow and blacklight, but it didn't really work super well. I also wanted to dust Toothless with some blacklight and some glow. I'll actually grab my blacklight because it kind of works. Now that all of the lights are off, you can actually kind of see that right here, that one crystal's glowing. Whoopsie. Kind of see that that one crystal's glowing. It's glowing pretty good. Now I'm going to go in with this blacklight. There we go. You could kind of see where I went on and tried making him glow in the black light. If I have it over here, where it's not right on him, the camera picks it up a lot better. It's harder to see in real life, but the camera picks it up pretty well. But you could kind of see if I go like that. I tried making that green crystal glow, tried making his eyes glow green, and I also wanted up here to have that kind of alpha Toothless look from the second movie, where when he was in like that alpha mode, he kind of glowed kind of blue. I also went in on some of these crystals with some UV paint. You can see it right there. But the paint didn't really work super well. I also got glow in the dark paint, but that didn't work at all compared to the UV paint. The UV paint worked pretty well, but still isn't working as good as I wanted it to. But yeah, I'll show you a clip of him in the sunlight because he looks really cool in the sun. So I wanted, real quick, I'll say it again, I wanted a mix of all the movies. The base is a mix between all the movies, got that kind of algae and overgrown look that you see in a lot of the parts of the first movie. That's why I put all these algae and like almost like a small little tree growing right here. Just all around the base. Then I also wanted that kind of weathered, braided look that you see in some parts of the village in the first movie. Then all this stone, especially these kind of hexagon shapes, I got the idea of that from the first and second movie. Mostly the second movie when Hiccup meets his mother. And then I wanted to incorporate almost like this look, almost like this was sculpted by the Vikings themselves. Then I wanted Toothless to just look realistic like Toothless. Then the crystals were inspired from the hidden world. But yeah, I have been getting a lot of requests to do a step-by-step tutorial on how to sculpt Toothless. So I will be doing that sometime in the future. There's a couple other projects I want to hurry and finish. So I'm going to do those first. And I just want to thank you guys for your patience and everything. Life's been pretty crazy, so this project took extra long. But I'm super happy you guys enjoyed the videos. I got lots of amazing feedback. See him? Look at that. There's a fruit fly on his saddle. Right there. Get out of here. Shoot. I really appreciate your guys' support. Really grateful for it. And I'm grateful that everyone loved this series as much as I have. How to Train Your Dragon was one of my biggest things growing up, and I'll tell more about that story later on. But I got loads of other How to Train Your Dragon projects I started and just never finished. And also a ton more I want to start. So if you guys are interested in seeing more stuff like that, maybe let me know if you want to see more stuff like that, whether it's drawing stuff or what other dragons you'd want to see sculpted. But yeah, again, thank you for your support. This was one of my favorite projects to do. Started it almost 3 years ago and I finished a little while ago. It's definitely one of my favorite sculptures so far. So yeah, thank you guys again for your support. You guys are awesome. Like, share, and subscribe, and show as many people as you can my channel so that we could grow and do more cool stuff like this. See you guys in the next one. You guys have an amazing rest of your day.